Roll Credits, where movie lovers get the trivia they didn't know they needed. This podcast was created with help from AI tools, so double-check any quotes before you drop trivia at your next movie night. Today we're diving into Bugonia. Did you know this bizarre sci-fi comedy is actually a remake of a cult South Korean film? That's just the beginning of how strange things get.
Oh, it really is just the tip of the iceberg with this one.
Totally. So for today's deep dive, we're basically tearing through a whole stack of sources. We've got critical essays, Wikipedia production notes, a bunch of deep dive Reddit discussions, and some really fascinating behind-the-scenes interviews.
Right, because there is so much to unpack with Yorgos Lanthimos' 2025 film here.
Exactly. And our mission today is to really figure out how this movie, which had a pretty massive budget of like $45 to $55 million, how it manages to blend this completely absurdist humor with just intense, sweat-inducing psychological tension.
Yeah, and beyond just the filmmaking of it all, we want to explore why its take on modern paranoia resonates so deeply with audiences today. I mean, it's a very specific kind of modern anxiety.
It really is. But okay, before we get into the heavy psychological stuff, let's just set the stage for anyone listening. Give us the spoiler light synopsis. Like, what is actually happening in Bugonia?
Sure. So at the center of the story, you have Teddy. He's this extremely intense, conspiracy-obsessed beekeeper.
Played by Jesse Plemons, right?
Yes, played brilliantly by Jesse Plemons. And Teddy, along with his autistic cousin Don, decides to abduct Michelle.
Who is Emma Stone's character?
Right, and Michelle is the highly polished, incredibly put-together CEO of this massive pharmaceutical giant called Oxalith.
Okay, so they kidnap a pharma CEO, but it's not like your typical corporate ransom situation, is it?
Not even close. Teddy fundamentally believes that Michelle is an alien, specifically an alien from a species called the Andromedans. Yeah, he is completely convinced she is personally orchestrating the collapse of the global bee population. And according to him, this is all part of some grand extraterrestrial plot to force humanity into subservience.
Which is just, I mean, it's totally bonkers on paper. It's like falling down a late-night Reddit rabbit hole, but waking up to find you've actually kidnapped someone in real life.
That is exactly what it feels like.
But the crazy thing is, this whole premise didn't just come out of nowhere. Like I mentioned in the intro, it's based on a 2003 South Korean film called Save the Green Planet.
Right, which is a massive cult classic. But what's really interesting is how different the two productions are. The original Korean film was made for like $3 million. Very low budget.
Very scrappy.
Exactly. And the screenwriter for Bugonia, Will Tracy, his approach to adapting it was so unusual, he actually only watched the original film once.
Wait, really? Just once?
Yeah, just one time. He actively avoided watching it again during his entire writing process. He really wanted to forge a completely unique path and not just do a shot-for-shot remake.
That is wild. But I guess it explains some of the massive changes they made. Because if I remember from the notes, in the original film, the CEO that gets kidnapped was an older man.
He was. And Tracy flipped that to a female executive for Emma Stone.
Right. And they also changed the accomplice, right? In the original, the main guy's girlfriend helps him, but in Bugonia, it's his neurodivergent cousin, Don.
Yes, which totally changes the family dynamic in the house.
But wait, I want to go back to that first change, because that feels huge to me. Flipping the CEO from a male figure to a really powerful female executive. I mean, having two men abduct a woman and trap her in a basement. Does that fundamentally change the power dynamics of the kidnapping?
It absolutely adds a completely different layer of tension to the whole thing. The optics of it are very uncomfortable, and the movie knows that. But what is so impressive is how impartial the film remains about the whole situation.
Impartial how? Like, politically?
Yeah, exactly. The film's satire is incredibly sharp, but it targets everything equally. On one hand, it's absolutely skewering corporate big pharma greed and that sort of sterile executive class.
Right, the whole system that Michelle represents.
Exactly. But on the other hand, it's equally critical of internet-fueled conspiracy paranoia and the kind of dangerous delusions that Teddy represents.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So just to be clear for you listening, we're not taking a side on either of those issues here today. We're just reporting on the themes the movie is tackling.
Yeah.
But it sounds like the movie itself refuses to let either side off the hook.
Exactly. It just throws these two opposing worldviews into a basement and watches them collide.
And that collision really hinges on the performances. Let's talk about the cast, because looking through these Reddit discussions, people are just blown away by Jesse Plemons.
Oh, His performance is a masterclass in discomfort.
That's the word that keeps popping up. Uncomfortable. Fans are calling his deadpan delivery just deeply unsettling.
Well, he's walking this incredibly difficult tightrope. Because on one side, Teddy is a terrifying captor. He's unpredictable and violent. But on the other side, he's also just this pathetic, grieving son.
Right, because his mother is in a coma.
Right.
And she got there after taking one of Oxalith's drugs.
Exactly. So Plemons has to make you feel that genuine, heartbreaking grief while also making you terrified of what he might do next.
Which brings us to Emma Stone as Michelle. And, I mean, this is her fourth feature-length collaboration with Yorgos Lanthimos, so they clearly have this deep trust. But her transformation here is wild.
It's completely mesmerizing. She plays this master of corporate, dead-eyed empathy so perfectly.
Oh, and we have to talk about the head shaving scene.
Mhm.
Because, spoiler alert, she gets her head shaved.
Yeah.
But she did it for real, right?
She did. They shot that scene in a single take, using 4 different cameras at once to make sure they captured it from every angle.
That is so stressful. I mean, if one camera jams or someone flubs a line...
You can't just glue the hair back on and do take 2. The pressure on that set must have been unbelievable. But she was totally committed. There's even this great bit of trivia where, for the scene where her character is driving right before the abduction, Emma Stone personally chose the song playing in the car.
Oh, right. It was Good Luck, Babe by Chappell Roan.
Yes, which is such a specific vibe, and it just shows how involved the actors were in shaping these characters. Lanthimos really encourages that. He gave them any free time they had while they were at the Cannes Film Festival just to rehearse and block out Bugonia.
Wow, so they were promoting other movies and still squeezing in rehearsals for this one. That's dedication, and that preparation really shows, especially with the supporting cast. Like Aidan Delpis, who plays Cousin Don.
Right, and he's a non-professional autistic actor, which brings this incredible authenticity to the role.
And then there's Stavros Halkias.
Yes, which is such an interesting casting choice.
It really is, because he's a stand-up comedian and a massive Lanthimos fanboy, apparently. He jumped at the chance to play Casey, the local sheriff. But the backstory there is super dark.
It is. Casey is the sheriff, but he also used to babysit Teddy when Teddy was a kid, and he actually abused him.
Which is horrific. But going back to Michelle for a second, I keep thinking about her dialogue. Because she uses this very specific corporate HR speak. It's like armor. You know?
Oh, absolutely.
She uses this very calm, empathetic language to just completely detach from the reality of being tied to a chair. Which makes me wonder about Teddy. Like, is Teddy actually looking for the truth about aliens? Or is he just looking for a narrative big enough to hold all his overwhelming grief?
That is the core question of the movie, really, and I think it's the latter. He's built this massive conspiracy because the alternative, that his mother is in a coma for no grand reason, that the bees are just dying, that the world is just random and cruel, is too painful to accept.
Right. If there's an alien plot, then at least there's a reason for his pain.
Exactly. The conspiracy is a coping mechanism.
That makes total sense. And speaking of containment, the actual physical space they're trapped in is fascinating. Let's get into the production design, because Lanthimos has this very minimalist directing style where he just lets actors loose in a space.
He really does. He wants them to physically inhabit the environment.
And to do that, production designer James Price didn't just build a flimsy set. He built Teddy's entire house, including the basement, on the Coldenfaugh estate in the UK.
Which is a huge deal for the actors. Because it was a fully practical, connected set, they could shoot the movie chronologically.
Oh, wow. So they could actually walk from the front door, down the hall, and into the basement in real time.
Exactly. They didn't have to break character or imagine the layout. They were just living in the messy, claustrophobic isolation of that house day after day.
And that claustrophobia was really amplified by the camera they used. Robbie Ryan, the cinematographer, shot this almost entirely on a vintage Wilcom W11 VistaVision camera.
Which is an incredibly rare, specific piece of equipment. It's an 8-perf, 35mm format.
Right, and for those of us who aren't huge camera nerds, that basically means it shoots these massive, stunning, landscape-style high-resolution images.
It does, but there is a major catch with that camera.
Oh yeah, the noise.
It is unbelievably loud.
I read that it basically purrs like a tractor while it's rolling. The actors actually had to adapt to this loud mechanical sound in the room with them.
Which is funny, but it was an absolute nightmare for the sound designer, Johnny Byrne.
Because Lanthimos hates ADR, right?
He completely despises it. ADR is when actors re-record their dialogue in a studio later, but Lanthimos wants the raw, on-set audio. So Johnny Byrne had to miraculously dial out all that loud camera noise in post-production without ruining the actors' voices.
That sounds like a technical miracle, but visually it pays off, especially the framing in the basement scenes. They shot so much of it from these really low angles looking up at the actors.
Yeah, that visual language does two things. It makes the basement feel even more dungeon-like and oppressive, like the ceiling is pressing down on them. And it also makes the characters look distorted and larger than life.
It's like using a telescope to examine a microscopic bug, It makes every single bead of sweat and every twitch of paranoia feel monumentally huge on screen.
That's a great way to put it.
But it raises an interesting question. Does the high-resolution clarity of that massive camera purposefully contrast with the murky, unclear reality of the characters' minds?
Oh, I think it has to be intentional. The image is so incredibly crisp and undeniable, but the things the characters are saying and believing are completely untethered from reality. It creates this fantastic friction for the viewer.
Friction is the right word.
Yeah.
And you really feel that friction in the sound design, too.
Right.
Especially the score. Let's talk about Jerskin Fendrix, the composer.
His work on this is incredible.
And the prompt he got from Lanthimos was just hilarious. He was given exactly 3 words to work with before he even saw the script.
Right. Bees, basement, spaceship.
That's it. Just bees, basement, spaceship. And from that, he recorded a massive 90-piece orchestra.
But he didn't want it to sound like a traditional sweeping Hollywood score. He purposefully utilized musical mistakes in the recording.
Like having the woodwind players overblow their instruments so the sound kind of cracks and strains.
Exactly. Those harsh, broken sounds mirror Teddy's fractured mental state. The music is literally fraying at the edges, just like he is.
It's so unsettling, which honestly transitions perfectly into the psychology of all this paranoia and why it hits so hard for audiences today, because you have to look at the context of when this was written.
Right. Will Tracy wrote the script in the spring of 2020.
Right in the middle of the pandemic lockdowns.
Yeah. And you can absolutely feel the DNA of that era in the story, the intense atmosphere of physical isolation, the total destabilization of everyday life.
And the rampant conspiratorial thinking.
Exactly. It's a direct reflection of that real-world moment where everyone was just trapped inside, staring at screens, trying to make sense of a world that felt completely broken.
It makes the title of the movie so interesting, too. Bugonia. It sounds like a made-up sci-fi word, but it's actually an ancient Mediterranean myth.
It is. It's the myth that a swarm of bees can spontaneously generate from the rotting carcass of a dead cow.
Which is gross, but also, like, a really profound metaphor. Life emerging from rot. It really hints at the film's dark ecological themes.
And it connects right back to the modern listener's reality. Think about the world we're living in right now.
Oh, totally. Trust in institutions has completely eroded.
Exactly. And corporate power, like Oxalith in the movie, often speaks in this very soothing, therapeutic language while doing terrible things.
Yeah, that HR speak we were talking about earlier.
Right. And when you're surrounded by that, making the leap to full-blown conspiracy theories doesn't actually require madness. It just requires fatigue.
Wow. That's really profound. It requires fatigue.
It really does. People are tired. And Teddy's belief system is adaptable and bulletproof because certainty, even a terrifying certainty about aliens, feels safer than ambiguity.
Man, that is so true. It's easier to believe an alien is doing it than to accept that the systems we rely on just don't care about us. But, that heaviness might actually explain something else. Despite all this critical acclaim, and it got Oscar nods, by the way, the movie was a box office flop.
It really struggled commercially.
Yeah, it only made about $41 to $43.5 million, which didn't even cover its budget. So I have to ask, did the movie fail to find a massive audience? Because its reflection of our society's exhaustion and distrust just hit a little too close to home for a fun Friday night at the movies.
I think you hit the nail on the head. Audiences generally go to the movies to escape reality, right?
Right, to eat popcorn and forget their jobs for 2 hours.
Exactly. But Bugonia doesn't let you escape. It locks you in a basement with the exact same anxieties you're trying to hide from in the real world. It's brilliant, but it's not a comforting watch.
No, it definitely isn't. It leaves you feeling pretty exposed.
Which actually leads to a really interesting final thought to leave you listening with.
Okay, let's hear it.
Think about the film's premise for a second. If a truly impartial extraterrestrial observer were to evaluate humanity's experiment right now...
Like looking down at us from space.
Exactly. looking at both our cold, destructive corporate machines and our desperate, paranoid fringes. What would they actually report back to their mothership?
Oh, wow.
Would they find any reason to side with us? Or would they just take one look at the mess we've made and decide to side with the bees?
Man, I think they'd side with the bees. That is a chilling thought to end on. And that wraps our dive into Bugonia. If you enjoyed this strange trip into conspiracy and sci-fi chaos, follow Roll Credits and share it with your fellow movie lovers. We'll be back soon with more trivia, more movie magic, and maybe a few more weird surprises. Stay curious.